I want to talk about the recent wave of allegations and accusations and revelations about sexual assault and rape and harassment in Hollywood and Washington and various other places. And it hasn't escaped notice that a disproportionate amount of these allegations seem to be directed at leftists of one sort or another. And so that raises the question, are leftists more likely to be sex offenders? And I think the answer probably has to be yes, and I'm going to make a couple of arguments and raise a couple of points that are consistent with that hypothesis. You're welcome to respond if you wish. And the first one is that leftism is effeminacy, and effeminacy is leftism. And effeminacy in males in many species is associated with the sneaky fucker strategy. So we've all seen the video of the little cuttlefish, the little male cuttlefish that looks suspiciously like a female, coming in past the alpha males, guarding the females, and bam, fertilizing them. And that's a common thing in many animal species for the weaker, smaller males to put on, effeminate airs in order to either disarm the suspicions of the females or of the alpha males and to gain, surreptitious access. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if something like that is going on with, leftist males, particularly these soy boy feminists, right? Who are probably expecting these expressions of solidarity to endear them to females. And then whether or not they do, especially if they don't, there's likely to be some frustration and maybe even some desperation there. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's some of this sneaky fucker stuff going on among humans, because it is pretty common throughout a number of animal species. And, additionally, leftism is disproportionately appealing to impulsive people, to short-term thinker type people. And if you want to think about, let's say, rape as a reproductive strategy, and it is a reproductive strategy, feminists and postmodernists say that rape is about power and not sex. But if you look at a graph of, who gets raped, then, that hypothesis doesn't survive contact with the evidence, because it's virtually indistinguishable from a graph of, say, sex appeal or fertility. And, the risk peaks for like late adolescent females, and then it goes down precipitously after that. So, if you want to think about rape as a reproductive strategy, then it's a very low cost, very high payoff strategy, but also high risk, because you could get caught. And if you do get caught, there are serious consequences. So we could expect that strategy to be disproportionately appealing to, impulsive or low impulse control individuals, and also to short-term thinker type individuals. And leftists are very short-term thinkers. They want all this free stuff right now: free college, free debt forgiveness, free food, free housing, free medicine, high minimum wage, all this kind of stuff. And it all sounds very appealing in the short term. And if you're not reckoning the long-term costs or the long-term consequences, you're never going to understand why it's not a good idea. And so that's why this stuff is appealing to leftists. So if they're very short-term people and they're more impulsive, have less impulse control, we might expect that rape as a reproductive strategy is disproportionately appealing to leftists. And I don't mean that they're necessarily trying to reproduce or have any desire to reproduce by these means, but that's the psychological origin of the impulse, or the evolutionary origin of that impulse, the sexual attraction and sexual libido is essentially a reproductive urge. And then finally, you have, in conservative or right-wing cultures, are very family-oriented, right? So it's a family-centric culture, and people are, maintaining a network of relations with family members and with, community as well, neighbors and community. But, families are the center of that. And so you can't just go around raping willy-nilly, because every woman also has, if not a husband, she'll have a father, and she'll have brothers, and she'll have cousins, right? And those are people you either want to maintain cooperative relations with long-term, or, who can kick your ass, or worse. And so, the risk of that strategy of, reproduction or obtaining sexual release or whatever is correspondingly higher under right-wing norms and institutions, which are family-centric. But the left-wing ideal is atomistic individualism. So you have all these atomistic individuals going around, pursuing various material ends or various, sensual stimuli, and they don't have those connections either to their family or to communities. They're atomistic individuals. They're just a sea of atomistic individuals. And under those circumstances, rape has got to seem like a much more appealing prospect, or a less risky prospect, because individuals are responsible for their own safety and their own protection. That's a natural fact. That's inalienable fact. Like, leftists disclaim that responsibility, and they say, a woman should never be responsible for avoiding victimization. But, you can't just disclaim it, because as a matter of actual practical fact, if you're an atomistic individual, you ultimately are responsible for your own safety and security. And not only is that, there's not as much you can do as a family can do or a community can do, but if you're also disclaiming that responsibility on top of it and trying to shirk that responsibility and push it off onto others, whether or not they pick up that responsibility, then you're a much easier target, and a much more profitable target, and a much less dangerous target than in a right-wing context, in a right-wing society. So for all of those reasons and others, I think probably leftists have got to be much more likely to be sex offenders. And, that's almost certainly the case in my opinion. Now, I could be wrong. You're welcome to say otherwise or to add to that if you wish. But, that certainly appears to be the size of things, as far as I can tell.